when you're purely in that moment and you are living that and feeling that, and especially when you're on the pass and you're directing that orchestra, that is that sweet spot of perfect bliss. And there's nothing like that. And that's why I could just do the pass and dress plates every night of my life for the rest of my life.
This is The Crackling. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Some chefs recognise that the link to great produce and quality butchering enables them to create the very best eating experiences. For Scott Pickett, the chance to create his own butchery to supply his restaurants was too much to resist as his restaurant group grew. What impact does the ability to break down whole animals and share the fruits of them with different venues in a group? Well, Scott, you've been taking on a lot of new restaurants at a time when a lot of restaurants have been struggling. What's it been like in the last year and a half, taking on some really iconic venues and opening some new venues as well?
It's been an absolute roller coaster, to be honest with you, Huck. It's probably, if we start with Long Grain, that was something that I've always loved Long Grain. It's a great space. It's a great restaurant, a great brand, great people, great food. It's truly iconic. And I suppose, when I heard about that first and foremost, that I just didn't want Melbourne to lose an institution and an icon. So, I gave John a call, John Van Handel. We went for a couple of walks around the Tan, met for a coffee at Matilda. And, he's at the stage of his life where he just kind of, really just didn't want the hassle, really, of COVID and everything. And he's kind of relocating and splitting his time in bar. And so, I said that I wanted to take on the beast, which has been great for me to learn a new cuisine last year. I've always done a little bit of Asian in our food, here and there, sort of Southeast Asian inspired flavors, but not, but I'm no expert by any means. So that's been great to really, in my 40s, develop and understand a new cuisine and to run a great restaurant and a great business, and to really just work on sort of mentoring the team there and seeing what Long Grain 2.0 is. And, that's going really well. Providor's going well for us. Pick up and takeaway is going well. It's obviously a terrible time for every restaurant out there. But, we've survived through this 18 months since I kind of bought it and, just waiting to open up and get ready, to go with Long Song. We've done a little bit of a refurb up there, and that's going to be a bit more of a bar and function event space because it's such a massive space and it's a beautiful building. But it was just too big. Unless there was 200 or 300 people in there, it didn't have any energy. And so we've kind of zoned that off into 4 or 5 little areas so we can have different events, or you can come for a drink or, a bit of kind of Thai street food over coal and stuff up there. So that'll launch when we're finally out of this mess and allowed to go as well too. So, yeah, that's the first one. And then, but then Chancery Lane, that's in the former Vue de Monde site that Shannon had, I think, for about 15 or 16 years, where he had Vue there before he went up to Rialto, and then Bistro Vue, and then Ikejimi. And again, I knew that was, that Shannon, was looking to move on from there and the ownership group and stuff. And it's always been like an iconic restaurant and a wonderful restaurant space and a beautiful building. And I hadn't done much in the city and we're kind of going against the grain a bit, but I just thought it was great to do a kind of, contemporary European bistro in there as well too. So we built that, trying to use our downtime as effectively as we can.
Well, one of the interesting things about the downtime and the use of that time has been the building of an area at Estelle and bringing on a full-time butcher. Can you tell us about the program that you have there?
Yeah, so to set ourselves up, it's kind of funny that I kind of had all these ideas kicking around for a while, and COVID just gave me the time and the headspace and maybe the the self-belief when you think that, you could possibly lose everything that's completely out of your control to even go the other way and buck the trend. So I'd had my eyes on a little warehouse that's right at the back of Estelle, like it's literally 50 metres away, to do a production kitchen or a prep kitchen. And we actually call it the man cave because I haven't got a shed at home and I want a little spot to store my Harley and just a little workshop. So I've kind of got that. And then the kitchen built and an office and a little kind of like a reading meditation room with lots of cookbooks and stuff and everything. But I thought that with the amount of restaurants and the size of the group now, that would take our butchery program in house. So I've got 2 full-time butchers. like we've got a dry aging room that's probably about 12 square meters, probably about 3x4, I suppose, 2x5 or something, about 10, 12 square meters. And so now what we're doing is, the scales of economy starting to kick in, where I kind of got to the stage, when we're fully operational, we might do 100 ducks a week at Matilda and, 50 at Estelle and 50 or 70 at Chancery Lane. And to even dry age the ducks, we can't, we don't have the space and the time in the restaurants to have 300, 400, 500 dry aging at a time. So we dry age all our own ducks in there, get those processed, dry age grass fed and grain fed beef. But I started a charcuterie program as well too, and we've got a slide rail in there that goes through from the, there's a boning room that's next to the dry age room. I finally bought a bandsaw, right? Did a bit of live stream to get a bandsaw. And with spring coming, we'll be doing whole lambs as well too. But we do, 2 to 4 sort of whole pigs a week as well too. And all the old fridges from Vue de Monde, all the old kind of bar fridges, I had them converted and signed off and done for in-house charcuterie programs. So we've got sort of temperature controlled in there, rods and everything. So we've got everything from your prosciutto to copper to saucisson sec to bresaola. And now that we've started the meat stuff, primarily pork, obviously, with all that kind of saucisson stuff, we're starting, to look into a bit of fish as well too. But we're doing our own bacons, own sort of hamons, jambon de Paris, lots of different stuff. So we've used this time to really research and evolve and develop our program, So that's amazing having that in-house.
So when you get the whole pigs in, how do you break it down and use what are you using the different sections for?
And so the shoulders, so we'll go through different stages depending on what the restaurants are using when they're operational. But we've got like a dry aging room, then we've got the wet aging or the wet room for box meat, but that also has pickles and brines and preserves and salting in there. And so the shoulders will go to prosciutto. The loins will leave kind of whole, but then cut them through the bandsaw so that, the full racks are still on the bone, and they'll dry age for, 2, 3, 4 weeks before we send them to the restaurant. And then all the legs get boned out and they go into the charcuterie program. And then with the heads as well too, doing, different types of pressed terrines, pig's heads terrines, ears. So we'll process the whole pork and really do the whole nose to tail, and then we'll allocate sort of certain sections and cuts, either for the dry age program, for the restaurants, for the charcuterie, for pork mince, for stuff that goes to long grain. I mean, one of the great things now is we've got different restaurants that have different styles of food and different cooking techniques. So when the meat's dry aged already, when the butcher gets the pork in, he'll go, okay, so I've got 4 racks coming on here, and they might go to Matilda, or the belly, or the racks might go to Chancery Lane. The bellies might get sort of hot smoked at Matilda for breakfast bacon, or for the egg and bacon rolls there that we do on weekends. And then the shoulders might be on salt for a while before they dry age and cure then, which are probably coming on. The first batches are probably 3 months away from having 12 months on sort of dry age. And the curing process of the prosciutto, and then the legs boned out and then used. And then we'll look at what we want to do with the neck and different pieces. So, and then bones will into stocks and sauces.
Do you remember the first time that you broke down a whole pig, and what sort of impact did it have on you?
I started with smaller animals, and this is what I kind of go through when I do sort of in-house butchery with the team and I do programs or training sessions, is we'll start with rabbits. Yeah, really, because the bone structure, this is something that a lot of people forget, that the bone structure is very, very similar on a rabbit to a hare, to a spring lamb, to a pig, to a cow, really. The joints are very, there's more cuts as there's more muscles and more cuts as the animal gets bigger. But if I want to take off the hind legs, or if I want to take off the shoulders, or if I want to look at the rack, it's much easier to handle, a 2 kilo rabbit than it is a 60, 70, 80 kilo pig. And so I started like with rabbits and was trained through that. And then I did a huge amount of sort of full, of whole animal butchery when I was in London at the Square. I'd do 30, 40, 50 hares a week, and then sort of spring lamb as well too. And then when I got back to Australia, we do a lot more, lamb, pork, butchery really too. But then enjoying the fact that you can use the crackle, that you can use the skin, that you can use the fat, that you can break it all down, that you can trim it up as to how you want and really cut through. So first time probably did a pork was late 90s, I suppose.
You spent a lot of time in the UK cutting your teeth over there. What sort of impact did that have on you and your cooking style?
It probably, look, as a professional, as a cook, I thought I was pretty good, like most young lads do before they go to the UK and then cook with the big boys. It probably took my intensity at that time to the next level, my work ethic and my attention to detail. But I think when you think about it as an actual cook, is what I learned from from Phil Howard at the Square, is really about the marriage of flavours and about trying to keep food simple as simple as you can, and just execute really great technique, great produce as always that every chef uses. So that's the backbone of any great cook, really, as seasonal as it can be these days, as local as it can be, and just season, well cooked, simple food.
What was it about being in those brigades that was so defining for you?
I think the pressure and the intensity and the striving for perfection daily. In those days, the Square was doing 80 for lunch and 120 for dinner. It's not a 30 or 40 seater, it's not a 30 or 40 seater 2-star that's pushing for 3. It was a great business. It was a great restaurant, but you fucking worked hard too. And it didn't matter. It's the only kitchen I've ever been in my life. It didn't matter how hard you worked and how much you pushed, doing 15, 16, 17-hour days, you were still completely empty, the next day, because you just can't prep for 200 covers every day on the hot larder or on the veg or on the fish and be boxed for the next day. So it really taught me how to work on my time and how to multitask and how to bail myself out of the shit every day, which kind of helped in the early days of Estelle when there was only 3 in the kitchen,
You mentioned that your time in Phil Howard also allowed you to understand the balance of flavours. Are there any dishes from that time that you can tell us about?
Look, one of the best things about there, if we think about, game birds or meat and that kind of stuff, is Phil liked to use different cuts, and he liked to use the whole animal where we could, or 2 or 3 or 4 multiple cuts. So we might get Iberico pork from Spain. It's a beautiful that's a beautiful free-range pig, and then we might cure the bacon and then use that sort of like at a later date and do a rolled sort of torchon of the head, and then roast, the loin on the bone, and then, seam out the leg, and then, cook different cuts, different ways with different techniques. It wasn't all just in a pan. Some were poached, some were cooked sous vide, some were steamed, some were roasted, some were grilled, and so different cooking techniques for different cuts. And then do an acid of pork or an acid of lamb or something, or maybe hare or something, so you're using and really appreciating the whole animal itself.
You mentioned you only had 3 people in the kitchen in the early days at Estelle. Take us back to that time. What were the challenges of getting that off the ground?
Me, I suppose I was pretty wild in those days, Huck, as you know. I was, very hardcore. There was only a small brigade. We really pushed the limits with our sort of multi-course tasting menus, a tiny, tiny kitchen. I was drinking and partying pretty hard in those days as well too. So it was one of those baptism of fires of your first restaurant, where you just want everything to be perfect, but you don't have the budget. You can't afford plates, you can't afford trays, you can't afford stuff that you need. And then over time, as you build up the cash flow and the business itself, you can reinvest and kind of get to, where we are now with 7 venues plus the Conti coming on down the coast later on in the year. So, when we started, there was 5 full-time staff in the group. Now, even though we're in lockdown on and off in between normal operations, now will be, we're about between 250 and 300. And then by Christmas with the Conti, we'll be at about 500, So it's crazy that in 10 years, you've gone from 5 to 500 staff and just like accepting how my role changes as well too,
Was that ever your plan to have so many venues and so many staff?
Never. Never. I wish I had a 2, 3, 5 year, 10-year plan. It just, look, I'm a man that's obsessive like, most good cooks, and sometimes you just can't say no. And as much as I love food, I love being in the kitchen, I also love the challenge of running a restaurant or having an idea really primarily, or a dream. And this is what I put it down to. I kind of get bored very easily. So like I get the restaurant set up in 12, 18 months, then I'll leave it to the boys and I'll, touch base at Matilda, I'll do 1 or 2 services a week there now, but I'll spend the mornings, in Estelle because that's where my office is, and I'm around the corner, and I'll share my dinner service times. I still do 6 dinner services a week when we're going. And I like to, run the business in the business during the day, and I just don't do prep anymore. But then I enjoy the service, and then I'll work on the new dishes. I'll do the pass, or just go cook a section for the night, or just dress plates, or have that fun, that fun time when I've got good cooks around me that are running it day to day, and then I can just slot in. But it never really was the plan. It's just I really love having a dream and an idea and the concept, and then thinking about it, and then whether it be 3 months or 6 months or 3 years later, actually going through the whole process of design, of marketing, of branding, of kitchen build, the build process itself, and then opening the restaurant. I mean, that's the dream, really, isn't it?
Has this changing of your role, and the time away from the kitchen, has it changed the way that you use produce and cook?
I have a clearer mind now in some respects too, because I'm not caught up in the daily grind of what things are. So when I do, I'll still get to the kitchen, probably 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon and be there till 10 or 11. So I'm still doing 40 hours a week at night times in the kitchen, but when we open a venue like Chancery Lane, I'll be in there the whole time. Normally when same as when we open the Conti down at Sorrento, I'll be there for the first 3 months in the kitchen with the team, pushing on and making sure it's right. And then when it's settled, then I'll manage the business a bit more, and then kind of slot in and out of services. But it gives me a clearer mind to walk in and see things that the guys that are in the daily grind don't always see, or to have an outside perspective and an overall view on whether the food is where it needs to be, whether we can improve it, but also what the customer's experience is, walking the customer's path, whether it be through the front door, through the tables, trying to think about what they are, so that I'm not just solely focused on the kitchen, and I'm letting the younger team, they have fresh ideas and great ideas and different things, let them, find their path as well too.
Tell us a bit about Pickett's Deli and Rotisserie. I know that we can't fly internationally at the moment, but tell us about that business, and when we are flying again, what's it going to be offering?
Well, I love a good sandwich. I love a sandwich, and I love roast beef cooked on the rotisserie, or roast pork with that beautiful crackling that's slow cooked, and you put a loin of pork on there, and it rolls, and it's juicy, and it's crispy, and it's salty, and it's crunchy. And having that in great bread with coleslaw, or doing a Reuben, or some pickles and loads of butter and maybe a dirty gravy, that to me is the idea of a perfect lunch, like a big crusty roll with big roast carved pork and applesauce and a slaw or something. You get that in there, and it's hot and sour and salty and crispy and crunchy, and there's acid in there. It's just delicious. So, we serve lots, like we kind of do two ends of the spectrum there. We do the really healthy salads, the healthy sandwiches, healthy breakfast. And then we go to the other end of the spectrum where we do everything that's dirty and naughty and horrible and full of cholesterol and fat and crackling, all the good stuff that you can't have all the time. So that'll be coming back on with the rare roast beef sandwiches and the slow cooked pork that goes on the rotisserie every morning at 6 a.m. and it slow cooks for 3 or 4 hours, and then it's ready for the lunchtime kind of, dirty roast roll of the day.
You've got so many different venues now, and you love the time to be creative and think of what the opportunities are. Tell us about that creative process and where you see opportunity from a restaurant and culinary perspective. That
comes in random moments of time. The difficulty I have these days is switching from the left to the right or the right to the left, where you're thinking about numbers or business or operations or paying the bills or getting through COVID, all that kind of stuff, and then flipping to the other side where you've got a clear mind to be creative. And it's something that when I first took over the point back in 03, 04, and I was 27, 28, that was probably the hardest time to be creative, because I'd always cooked other people's food. And unlike the chefs coming through now, the internet had only really just started. There wasn't social media. There wasn't this, this avalanche of ideas and information and technique and images. So it probably took me 2 or 3 years. Really, I struggled with it in the early days to not just cook dishes that I'd been trained as a chef de partie or sous chef, to reproduce and to step outside the box and then find our own cuisine. So now that I tapped into that and I understand how my brain works, like a little bit at least, now when I feel that, coming on, and I suppose it's like being a writer or a painter, there is writer's block there sometimes. Sometimes you can't paint, sometimes you can't think or talk. But when I get inspired by something, and then it could be something that I see in the street or a product or a conversation or, whether it's raining today or it's sunshiny today, or I see something or smell something or I have an idea or a distant memory, and once that starts to go, then I try to remove myself from wherever I am and let that flow. And for me, normally that's when I clear my brain after service and I come back to a cell most nights at sort of 10 o'clock just to wind up my day. And then once I've been through emails and business and stuff and everything, if there's not too much going on, then I might just start reading a cookbook. Or I might just start kind of thinking about it like a core ingredient. Like I might think about pheasant, or I might think about a carrot, or I might be, and then I just let my brain go with that. I've got like notebooks and scrapbooks and spreadsheets now because I work in it. I might just have pork, and then I'll just sit there and I'll think about all the different cuts and all the different things we can use and all the different cooking techniques and all the different ideas, and I'll do a brain dump, that might take 20 minutes or like might take 4 hours. And then I've recorded that stuff, and then it might have, matching ingredients, and I'll read another book, and I might think about the umami or making your own miso or a different plate up or a different portion size, or if it's an entree or how it's cooked. And then I'll become kind of obsessive and just chase that kind of rabbit hole as far as I can until I'm done. And then I'm like, right, I'm exhausted. That's enough. Yeah, save and go home and sleep.
Amongst chefs, you're considered a chef's chef, and many chefs talk about wanting to eat your food and your ability to bring flavor to dishes and create harmony. Do you have any pork dishes over your career that have really stood out that sort of exemplifies you as a chef?
I think probably, if I think about it, it was one that, firstly, that's great to hear. That's really, really nice, because I am a bit of a cook's cook. I'm one of the boys or the lads, some would say so much, too much. And they're trying to push me off the past now a little bit as I get older. I mean, I'm 45 now. I've been doing this for 30 years. And I come in and do the past, and the boys like, Chefo, you don't have to. I'm like, but fucking what else do I do? You won't let me cook the sauce anymore. Let me dress plates and do the service. That's the best part of my week and my day. Is I did a suckling pig dish, whole suckling pig at the point, where we would bone out, I would basically butterfly or bone out the whole suckling pig with the head off and lay it flat. Then I would take the shoulders out, bone out the legs, take the shoulders out, take the skin off, and then put the skin back into where the rib cage is and the belly. They're only small. Split it down the seam with the backbone in the middle so it's two pieces, and you basically get a large rectangle that we would then salt cure with salt, 10% sugar, herbs and aromats. Leave that for 12 hours, rinse, dry, glue the shoulder back into this kind of rib cage belly, and then that's the same thickness as the leg. Cook that slowly overnight for about 14 hours at 68 degrees. And then we would press that, and you basically get a pork belly, kind of shape and size and thickness, but it was suckling pig. Then we would take that out. You get a beautiful jelly around. The jelly we then use for the sauce that I'll get to in a moment. But then we would cut a beautiful block. And on the side of the solid top old school, would put a piece of parchment and would slowly render the skin. And it was just skin down until you get this perfect glass-like suckling pig skin. Yeah, that's a puck. And we would keep the jelly and all the cooking liquor, do that with a reduced pork jus with lots of cider and apple juice, do it like in the spoomer. So it was like a whitey spoomer of pork and apple with a little celeriac apple salad, some nettle puree, and then a pork jus. Yeah, but I remember that one. Yeah, and that was probably 05, 06. Yeah, cracking dish.
It's pretty well documented the changes that you've implemented in your personal life to deal with mental health and alcoholism. What sort of impact has that change had on you, though, in your cooking?
I think, look, in my cooking, I probably can't tell you too much. I don't see it like that. But I would think that for me personally, as a person, as a cook and as a chef, I'm probably a little bit calmer. But if someone said to me at 35, and that's, coming down maybe one rung or two, maybe 12, depends on the mood and the service, obviously, Huck. But if someone said to me, I was a functioning alcoholic, I didn't drink during the day, but I'd partied 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 nights a week since I was 16 till 35, pretty much. And that was just the norm. That was accepted in the 90s, was accepted in the early 2000s. And I was kind of regarded and revered for being, one of the hardest working guys that kind of burnt the candle both ends. And I thought I was fine. And then at 35, if someone could say to me, do you know what? You're actually not operating at your full potential, even though I thought that I had for many, many years, because I'd done well. I'd run great kitchens. I worked in great kitchens. It was that sort of sense of reward and instant gratification because I'd had a big day. I'd worked hard. I'd smashed it. Then I could go out and have 27 beers, And if someone said to me, right, we can give you another 20 or 30% of your mental capacity, your body will feel better, you'll be clearer, you're more focused, you'll be a better cook, a better person. You'd sign up for that like every single day of the week. And it was really only when there were people around me, right, that I could actually, that pointed it out, that I could actually accept the fact that there was an issue there, that there was something that for an absolute control freak that I couldn't control. And so that's when I was like, well, actually, I think I need to fucking go and do something about this before it cost me my marriage and my restaurant and my life. And I didn't want to be another one of those guys. And so lots of guys come through that didn't actually fulfill their potential because of, drug or alcohol abuse or because of the toll that the industry really takes on people.
Well, the transformation has been remarkable in the sense of just the sheer volume of quality establishments that are very well recognised and your ability to maintain those standards. The industry's changed quite a lot, though. What sort of advice do you have for young chefs these days? Because the chefing world's different to the one you grew up in.
Yeah. You're very different. Our business model, laws and regulations, understanding, the expectation of the business owner and how things are. I always think back to when I was a young cook and I was 15, 16, 17, 18, and you look at the old man and he doesn't want to change and this is how it is and he knows best. And I'm like, I never wanted to become a dinosaur. And I didn't want us as a business and with our food and with our mentality and with our culture, to be trapped in a period of intensity that I was in, because I look back on it now and I think there are going to be people in 10, 20, 30 years that probably are all already saying it, that will look at chefs from the 80s and 90s and think that we were the coal miners of the 20s and 30s and 40s in the north of England. They're like, why the fuck did you do that? Like, why would anybody do that? Like, why would you work that hours? Why would you do that body? But that was that was just the time. That was how it was. So what we now try to look for is how we can have a work-life balance, on how there's nothing wrong with, the team doing 40 hours or 38 hours for the juniors and stuff, and 45 to 50 for the senior guys. Me not feeling guilty about that. The chefs that are in my generation don't feel guilty about taking a night off. Like, there were guys in 90s, or even before that, or even Donovan Cook when I came back in 02, 03, you just didn't miss a dinner service in your restaurant. Yeah, Phil Howard didn't miss a service, like at Bacchus in 93, 94, 95. Yeah, like Philippe Michel just would not miss a service because that was just ingrained in them. That is how it was. You were there every lunch, every dinner, you were just there. Done. Now the whole transformation is that, yeah, chefs, and that's allowed me to do what I do now as well too, without really being frowned upon, is that chefs don't have to be in their kitchen all the time, and they're not expected it to, with multi-venues. But what they are expected to do is ensure that the consistency and the passion and the love and the training for their staff is still there. And then that gives you a freedom for me to work on other projects or have a different insight into what we do and to break the shackles and to grow and evolve. And so, look, I think the one piece of advice for a young chef would be is to not put too much pressure on yourself as to what your path is going to be, because it'll work itself over time, but work for good people and surround yourself with good people. And if that's in a fine dining restaurant, that's fine. If that's in a cafe, that's at a golf club, that's in a, sporting club or anywhere, right? Like an Italian pizza restaurant, it doesn't matter. But just try your best every day and try to be the best version of yourself that you can be.
What is it that you love about what you do?
Honestly, yep, I love the adrenaline. I'm an adrenaline junkie like most guys, you know what I mean? Whether that be through riding fast bikes, driving fast cars, dirt bikes, the adrenaline of a certain, in the early days, younger days, drugs and alcohol, that kind of, living on the edge and pushing things to the limit, is that adrenaline of a service and watching a team of chefs actually perform when they're pushing to their limit, and you're just like, fuck, that piece of beef's cooked perfectly. That's glazed. And it's not just one or two plates, but it's hundreds of plates a night, and you're in that rhythm. There is nothing else. Well, there's a couple of things in life that I probably can't discuss, but there's not much else that actually, when you're purely in that moment and you are living that and feeling that, and especially when you're on the pass and you're directing that orchestra and seeing that is that sweet spot of perfect bliss. And there's nothing like that. And that's why I could just do the pass and dress plates every night of my life for the rest of my life.
Well, that's pretty amazing, Scott. And what you've built there, especially with the butchery, what sort of impact do you think that's going to have on the way that your restaurants operate when you do open up again?
Well, now we've always bought great meat and the best we can, but now we can access, smaller producers, buy by the pallet, sort of larger stuff, like we can handle it, we can take it all in-house, right? So there's a cost saving obviously there, right? Which is great because we could pass that on to the customer as well too, or we can offset it through our food cost, so that, we might be able to sell the lobster cheaper or the caviar or different things as well too. But what is also great is it's great for training the young cooks, that come through, because part of that, we've got this internal apprenticeship program that we've kind of, just getting off the ground, is the guys can now come to us and girls and go, okay, well, I might spend 6 months at Longrain and 6 months at Matilda, and I might learn Thai food, then I might learn over fire. And I've got a young apprentice that's probably almost at his 6 months mark now out in the prep kitchen that spends time with the butcher one day a week actually looking at whole animal butchery, right? And then understanding functions and events and then processes like that, and then understands dry aging and it makes charcuterie. And then he goes to charcoal to Chancery Lane, and he cooks kind of, Rob Cabord's kind of European bistro food. And so there's so many different styles and so many things to learn that now we can really train and multi-skill and show the staff so many different things. And that, this appreciation, for the whole animal and for using different cuts in different ways, actually cooked differently. I mean, that's, that's really what it's all about, isn't it?
Well, Scott, it's absolutely extraordinary what you've built, and obviously it's ongoing as well, and very much looking forward to seeing what happens when Melbourne opens up again in the next couple of months. What are you most looking forward to?
Having people in the restaurants just so we can enjoy really what a restaurant's ultimately about, and that's about the people, and having that energy and that feeling and that aura, and the enjoyment on the customers' faces, but also on the staff's faces, that are actually back in the swing of what they do, and that personal connection, through food. For me, that's really what we do it for.
Well, Scott, we've loved having you on the Crackling today to hear just a part of your story. No doubt we'll hear much more, so please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon. Yeah,
cheers, Huck. You take care, mate, and best of luck with everything. Thank you.
This is The Crackling, a Deep in the Weeds production in partnership with PorkStar. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we catch up with some of Australia's best chefs and pork producers to discover what makes Australian pork so special.